The wind howled through the desolate landfill on the outskirts of Millbrook, a small town in upstate New York. It was a cold February night, and the storm that had been brewing all day had finally unleashed its fury. Rain lashed against the piles of discarded furniture, broken appliances, and countless bags of trash that dotted the landscape. Lightning flashed across the sky, briefly illuminating the gloomy scene before plunging it back into darkness. Amidst this chaos, a golden retriever named Daisy huddled beneath the remnants of an old pickup truck. Her once lustrous coat was now matted and dirty, clinging to her emaciated frame. Pressed against her were 6 tiny puppies, barely a week old, whimpering softly as they sought warmth and comfort from their mother. Daisy's eyes, though weary, held a fierce determination. She had been through so much in the past few weeks, but nothing could shake her resolve to protect her babies. As another clap of thunder roared overhead, she instinctively curled her body tighter around her puppies, shielding them from the worst of the storm. In the brief moments of quiet between thunderclaps, Daisy's mind wandered to happier times. She remembered the warmth of a home, the gentle touch of loving hands, and the sound of laughter. Victor and Sarafina had been her world for 5 wonderful years. They had brought her home as a puppy themselves, a golden ball of fluff that quickly wormed her way into their hearts. Victor, a high school English teacher with a passion for classic literature, had named her Daisy after the character in The Great Gatsby. Sarafina, a pediatric nurse with a heart of gold, had rolled her eyes at the choice but quickly grew to love it. Together, they had created a home filled with love, laughter, and the simple joys of life. Daisy remembered lazy Sunday mornings when she would jump on the bed, wiggling between Victor and Sarafina as they groaned good-naturedly. She thought of long walks in the nearby Catskill Mountains, where she would bound through meadows, chasing butterflies and splashing in clear mountain streams. The memories of cozy evenings by the fireplace, with Daisy sprawled across both their laps as Victor read aloud from his favorite books, brought a momentary warmth to her heart. But everything had changed that terrible day in December. Sarafina, rushing to the hospital for an emergency shift during a snowstorm, had lost control of her car on the icy roads. The news had shattered their perfect world. Victor, consumed by grief, had withdrawn into himself, barely able to function. At first, Daisy had tried to comfort him. She would bring him her favorite toys, rest her head on his lap, and offer silent companionship during those long, dark nights. But as the weeks wore on, Victor's sorrow had twisted into something darker. He started staying out late, coming home smelling of whiskey and regret. The house, once filled with warmth and love, became cold and silent. Daisy, confused and anxious, had tried her best to adapt. She took care of herself as best she could, rationing the food left in her bowl and drinking from the leaky faucet in the backyard. But as her belly swelled with puppies, a result of an encounter with a neighbor's dog before Sarafina's accident, she knew she needed more care. One particularly bad night, Victor had come home in a rage. The sight of Daisy, heavy with puppies, seemed to push him over the edge. In a moment of drunken cruelty, he had grabbed her collar and dragged her to his truck. Daisy, too confused and frightened to resist, had whimpered softly as Victor drove through the night. When they reached the landfill, Victor's face was streaked with tears. He had opened the truck door and ordered Daisy out. For a moment, as their eyes met, Daisy saw a flicker of the man she had loved. But then his face hardened, and he drove away, leaving her alone in the darkness. That had been 2 weeks ago. Since then, Daisy had given birth to her puppies in this harsh, unforgiving environment. Every day was a struggle for survival. She scavenged through the trash, her nose, once used to sniff out hidden treats around the house, now searching for anything edible among the refuse. On good days, she found discarded fast food, half-eaten sandwiches, or if she was really lucky, a tossed-out packet of hot dogs past their expiration date. She would carry her findings back to her puppies, her own stomach growling as she watched them feed. Water was easier to come by, collected in puddles and discarded containers when it rained, which thankfully was often in the damp New York spring. The landfill was a dangerous place. Daisy had to be constantly alert for threats. There were other dogs, strays and ferals, who saw her puppies as easy prey. More than once, she had had to fight off attackers, her maternal instincts giving her a strength she didn't know she possessed. Then there were the humans, workers who would shoo her away with shouts and thrown debris, and the occasional group of teens who thought it fun to torment the dump dog as they called her. But worst of all was the machinery. Great metal beasts that roared through the landfill, reshaping the piles of trash with terrifying power. Daisy had learned to recognize the sound of their engines and would quickly gather her puppies, moving them to safety whenever the machines approached. As the storm continued to rage, Daisy's thoughts returned to the present. One of her puppies, the runt of the litter with a distinctive white patch on his chest, wriggled and whined. Daisy gently nuzzled him, offering what comfort she could. She had named this one Hope in her mind, though she had never been taught to name things. Something about his fighting spirit, the way he always pushed his way to feed despite being the smallest, reminded her of the feeling she used to get when Sarafina would scratch behind her ears and tell her she was a good girl. The storm showed no signs of letting up. Rain continued to pour down, and the wind drove it sideways, finding its way under their meager shelter. Daisy shifted, trying to block more of the rain from reaching her puppies. She was soaked through, her fur providing little warmth, but she didn't care. All that mattered was keeping her babies safe. As another flash of lightning illuminated the night, Daisy caught sight of something moving in the distance. Her ears perked up, and she tensed, ready to defend her young if necessary. But it was just a plastic bag, caught in the wind, tumbling end over end through the debris. Daisy relaxed slightly but remained vigilant. In this place, danger could come from anywhere, at any time. The night wore on, a seemingly endless cycle of wind, rain, and thunder. Daisy dozed fitfully, always on alert for any sign of threat. As the first weak light of dawn began to penetrate the cloud cover, the storm finally began to subside. The thunder grew more distant, the wind less fierce, and the rain slackened to a steady drizzle. Daisy knew she would need to find food soon. Her milk was running low, and her puppies were growing every day, their needs increasing. As soon as it was light enough, she would have to leave them to scavenge. It was always a risk, leaving them alone, but it was a necessary one. As she waited for full daylight, Daisy allowed herself a moment of weakness. She thought of her warm bed back home, of the full food bowl that had always been there, of the love and safety she had known. A small whine escaped her throat, but she quickly silenced it. She couldn't afford self-pity. Her puppies needed her to be strong. With the coming of dawn, the full challenges of another day made themselves known. But Daisy was ready to face them. She had survived this long, and she would continue to survive. For herself, and for the 6 little lives that depended on her. As the rain finally stopped and hints of blue began to show through the breaking clouds, Daisy stood, shook herself, and prepared to face whatever this new day would bring. As the storm clouds began to clear, revealing patches of blue sky, 11-year-old Noah Thompson laced up his worn sneakers and prepared for another adventure. It was Saturday morning, and like most kids in Millbrook, Noah looked forward to the weekend as a time for exploration and discovery. His grandfather, Sam, watched from the porch of their modest 2-story house, a cup of coffee warming his gnarled hands. "Where you off to today, kiddo?" Sam called out, his voice gruff but affectionate. Noah shrugged, his freckled face breaking into a grin. "Thought I'd check out the landfill. Billy said he found an almost new bike there last week." Sam's bushy eyebrows furrowed. "Be careful out there, Noah. That place ain't exactly Disneyland." "I know, Gramps," Noah replied, rolling his eyes good-naturedly. "I'll be back for lunch, promise." As Noah set off down the cracked sidewalk, his mind wandered to the changes the past year had brought. After his dad's deployment to Afghanistan and his mom's decision to move to California for work, Noah had come to live with his grandfather. It hadn't been easy at first. Sam was set in his ways, and Noah missed his parents terribly. But over time, they'd developed a rhythm, a partnership of sorts. Sam taught Noah how to fish in the nearby creek and how to change a tire, while Noah introduced his grandfather to the wonders of YouTube and helped him figure out his new smartphone. The walk to the landfill took about 20 minutes, leading Noah past familiar sights, Mrs. Johnson's flower shop, the diner where Sam took him for pancakes on Sunday mornings, and the library where Noah spent rainy afternoons losing himself in adventure stories. As he approached the outskirts of town, the well-maintained houses gave way to empty lots and eventually the chain-link fence surrounding the landfill. Noah knew he wasn't really supposed to be here. There were no trespassing signs posted every few feet, their red letters faded by sun and rain. But curiosity had always been Noah's driving force, and the potential treasures hidden in the piles of discarded items were too tempting to resist. He found a gap in the fence, the same one he and his friends had been using for months, and squeezed through. The smell hit him immediately, a mix of decay and chemicals that made him wrinkle his nose. But Noah pressed on, his eyes scanning the heaps of trash for anything interesting. As he picked his way through the debris, Noah's thoughts drifted to his dad. Staff Sergeant Jack Thompson was larger than life in Noah's eyes, brave, strong, and always ready with a joke or a word of encouragement. Noah missed their camping trips, the way his dad would point out constellations and tell stories about each one. He wondered what his dad would think of his landfill expeditions. Probably not approve, Noah thought with a twinge of guilt, but maybe he'd understand the need for adventure. Lost in thought, Noah almost missed the sound. A faint whimper, barely audible over the rustling of plastic bags in the breeze. He paused, tilting his head to listen. There it was again, a soft, plaintive cry that tugged at his heart. Noah moved carefully in the direction of the sound, clambering over a pile of discarded furniture. As he reached the top, he gasped at the sight below him. There, huddled beneath the rusted shell of an old truck, was a dog, thin and dirty, but unmistakably a golden retriever. And nestled against her were several tiny puppies, their eyes barely open. "Hey there," Noah called softly, his voice gentle as he slowly made his way down the pile. The dog, a female, he could now see, raised her head weakly, a low growl rumbling in her throat. Noah stopped, holding out his hands to show he meant no harm. "It's okay, girl," he murmured. "I'm not gonna hurt you." As he inched closer, Noah's heart ached at the condition of the dog and her puppies. They were clearly starving, their ribs visible through matted fur. The mother's eyes, though wary, held a glimmer of intelligence and desperation that made Noah's throat tight with emotion. Slowly, carefully, Noah reached into his pocket and pulled out the peanut butter sandwich he'd packed for lunch. He unwrapped it and tore off a small piece, tossing it gently towards the dog. She sniffed at it cautiously before devouring it in seconds. Noah continued this process, each piece of sandwich bringing him a little closer to the small family. By the time the sandwich was gone, Noah was sitting just a few feet away from the dogs. The mother's tail gave a tentative wag, and Noah felt a surge of triumph. "That's it, girl," he said encouragingly. "We're gonna be friends, you and me." As Noah sat with the dogs, trying to figure out what to do next, he thought about all the times his dad had told him to be brave, to stand up for those who couldn't stand up for themselves. This, Noah realized, was one of those moments. These dogs needed help, and he was in a position to provide it. With renewed determination, Noah stood up. "I'll be right back," he promised the dogs. "I'm gonna get help." The run back to his grandfather's house seemed to take forever. Noah's lungs burned and his legs ached, but he didn't slow down. He burst through the front door, startling Sam, who was watching a baseball game on TV. "Gramps," Noah gasped, trying to catch his breath. "I need your help. There's a dogs, at the landfill. A mom and puppies. They're starving, Gramps. We gotta help them." Sam's initial look of confusion gave way to concern as he absorbed Noah's words. He'd seen that look in his grandson's eyes before, the same determination that had characterized Noah's father and Sam's late wife. There was no arguing with that Thompson stubbornness. "All right, kiddo," Sam said, reaching for his jacket. "Let's go see these dogs of yours." Together, they gathered supplies, blankets, some leftover meatloaf from the fridge, a couple of old towels, and a large cardboard box. Sam drove them to the landfill in his beat-up pickup truck, listening intently as Noah explained everything he'd seen. When they reached the spot where Noah had found the dogs, Sam's breath caught in his throat. The sight of the emaciated mother and her vulnerable puppies stirred something in the old man's heart. He'd always considered himself more of a cat person, but there was no denying the wave of compassion that washed over him. "Well, I'll be," Sam muttered, kneeling down despite the protest of his arthritic knees. "You weren't exaggerating, were you, Noah?" Over the next hour, Sam and Noah worked together to gain the trust of the mother dog. Sam's gentle, patient approach complemented Noah's eager enthusiasm. They offered food and water, speaking in low, soothing tones until the dog allowed them to come close enough to pet her. "She needs a name, Gramps," Noah said as he stroked the dog's dirty fur. "We can't just keep calling her Girl. Sam studied the dog for a moment, taking in her golden coat and warm brown eyes. Despite her condition, there was a dignity about her, a quiet strength that reminded him of someone. "How about Daisy?" Sam suggested. "She reminds me of your grandma, tough as nails but sweet as honey." Noah's face lit up. "Daisy," he repeated, trying out the name. "I like it. What do you think, girl? Are you a Daisy?" The dog's tail wagged, thumping against the ground in what seemed like approval. With Daisy's trust tentatively secured, they began the delicate process of moving her and the puppies. Sam laid out one of the blankets in the cardboard box, creating a makeshift bed. Noah carefully lifted each puppy, counting as he went. 6, he announced. "There are 6 puppies, Gramps." Sam whistled low. "That's quite a litter. No wonder she's so thin, trying to feed all those hungry mouths." Once the puppies were settled in the box, they turned their attention to Daisy. She was weak and unsteady on her feet, but with gentle coaxing from Noah and Sam, she managed to climb into the back of the pickup truck. Noah sat with her for the drive home, the box of puppies secure beside him, whispering reassurances the whole way. As they pulled into the driveway of their home, Sam turned to Noah, his weathered face serious. "You know this is a big responsibility, right? These dogs are gonna need a lot of care." Noah nodded solemnly. "I know, Gramps. But we can't just leave them there. Dad always said we have to help those who can't help themselves." Sam's eyes misted over at the mention of his son. "Your dad would be proud of you, Noah," he said gruffly, giving his grandson's shoulder a squeeze. "All right then, let's get our new guests settled in." As they carried Daisy and her puppies into the house, setting them up in the warm, dry laundry room, Noah felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced since coming to live with his grandfather. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but he was certain of one thing: he and Sam were going to give these dogs the second chance they deserved. Looking at Daisy, now curled protectively around her puppies on a soft blanket, Noah made a silent promise. "Don't worry, girl," he whispered. "You're safe now. We're going to take care of you." And as the sun set on Millbrook, casting a warm glow through the windows of the Thompson house, a new chapter began for Noah, Sam, Daisy, and her 6 tiny puppies. A chapter filled with hope, healing, and the unbreakable bonds of family, both human and canine. The first few days after bringing Daisy and her puppies home were a whirlwind of activity for Noah and Sam. They quickly fell into a routine, taking turns feeding Daisy, who was too weak and malnourished to produce enough milk for her puppies. Sam, drawing on long-forgotten knowledge from his farming days, showed Noah how to prepare a puppy formula and bottle feed the tiny, squirming bundles. "Steady now," Sam instructed, guiding Noah's hands as he held a bottle to the smallest puppy's mouth. "That's it. Let him take it at his own pace." Noah's face was a mask of concentration as he watched the puppy suckle. "He's so small, Gramps. Will he be okay?" Sam's eyes softened as he watched his grandson. "He's a fighter, that one. Just like his mama. And just like you, kiddo." As the days passed, Daisy began to regain her strength. Her ribs were still visible, but her coat was starting to regain some of its luster thanks to the nutritious food and gentle baths Noah and Sam provided. She was still wary, startling at sudden movements or loud noises, but she was slowly learning to trust her new caretakers. One evening, about a week after the rescue, Noah was sitting on the floor of the laundry room, reading aloud from one of his favorite books. Daisy, who had been dozing in her bed, lifted her head and slowly, tentatively, made her way over to the boy. She hesitated for a moment before laying her head in Noah's lap. Noah froze, hardly daring to breathe. He glanced over at Sam, who was standing in the doorway, and saw his grandfather give an encouraging nod. Slowly, Noah lowered his hand and began to stroke Daisy's head. A soft thump filled the room as Daisy's tail began to wag. "Good girl, Daisy," Noah murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You're such a good girl." From that moment on, the bond between Noah and Daisy grew stronger each day. She became his shadow, following him around the house and yard, her eyes always watching him with a mixture of gratitude and affection. For Noah, Daisy's presence filled a void he hadn't even realized was there. The ache of missing his parents was still present, but it was soothed by the unconditional love of his new canine friend. Sam watched this blossoming relationship with a mixture of joy and bittersweet nostalgia. He saw echoes of his late wife in the way Noah cared for Daisy and her puppies, the same gentle touch, the same patient kindness. And in Daisy's devoted gaze, Sam recognized the look of a soul who had known hardship but found a safe harbor. As Daisy regained her health, her puppies thrived. Their eyes opened, their wobbly legs grew stronger, and their personalities began to emerge. Noah took to naming them based on their distinctive traits. There was Buddy, the largest of the litter, always first to the food bowl. Whisper was the quietest, content to cuddle up with her siblings. Rascal lived up to his name, always finding mischief. Sunny had a coat that was a shade lighter than her siblings, almost glowing in the sunlight. Champ was determined and athletic, already trying to climb out of their enclosure. And finally, there was Hope, the runt of the litter, small but spirited. Caring for 7 dogs was no small task, and it brought its share of challenges. There were sleepless nights when the puppies cried, messes to clean up, and the constant need for attention and care. But there were also moments of pure joy, the first time Daisy wagged her tail without fear, the day the puppies took their first wobbly steps, the sound of Noah's laughter as he played with them in the backyard. Sam found himself rising to the occasion in ways he hadn't expected. He built a sturdy pen for the puppies in the backyard, giving them a safe space to play and explore. He researched dog nutrition and care, making sure they were providing the best possible environment for Daisy and her pups. And on the nights when Noah was exhausted from the day's activities, Sam would take over the late-night feedings, murmuring soft words of encouragement to the puppies as he had once done for his own son. As the weeks passed, the changes in their household became more pronounced. The once quiet house was now filled with the sounds of barking, playful growls, and the pitter-patter of paws. The backyard, which had been mostly unused since Noah's arrival, became a hub of activity. Sam even found himself looking forward to the daily walks with Daisy, enjoying the fresh air and the way neighbors would stop to chat and coo over the recovering dog. One Saturday morning, as Noah and Sam sat on the porch watching Daisy play with her puppies in the yard, Noah turned to his grandfather with a serious expression. "Gramps," he said, his voice hesitant. Do you think we could keep them? Not just Daisy, but all of them?" Sam sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. He'd been expecting this question, dreading it even. "Noah, that's a big ask. 7 dogs is a lot for any family, let alone just the 2 of us." Noah's face fell, but he nodded, understanding the logic even if his heart disagreed. "I know. It's just, they feel like family now, you know?" Sam felt a lump form in his throat. He did know. Despite his initial reservations, these dogs had wormed their way into his heart just as surely as they had Noah's. He watched as Daisy gently herded Rascal away from the edge of the yard, her movements now strong and sure. He saw the way Hope, still the smallest but no longer frail, playfully pounced on Buddy's tail. And he thought of the quiet evenings when Daisy would rest her head on his knee as he read the newspaper, a comforting presence he hadn't realized he'd been missing. "Tell you what," Sam said slowly, an idea forming. "Why don't we see if we can find good homes for the puppies when they're old enough? Folks we know and trust, so we can still see them. And Daisy, well, I suppose she's already home, isn't she?" The smile that broke across Noah's face was brighter than the morning sun. He threw his arms around his grandfather, words of gratitude muffled against Sam's shirt. Sam hugged him back, marveling at how this unexpected adventure had brought them closer together. As the summer progressed, Daisy continued to blossom. Her fear of humans gradually faded, replaced by a gentle, trusting nature that made her a favorite in the neighborhood. She particularly took to children, patient and gentle even when enthusiastic hands petted her a bit too roughly. Sam often remarked that she seemed to have a sixth sense for those in need of comfort, whether it was Noah after a tough day at school or Mrs. Johnson from down the street, who would stop by to pet Daisy when the grief of losing her husband became too much. The puppies grew quickly, their antics providing endless entertainment and occasional exasperation. There was the time Rascal managed to knock over a bucket of soapy water during bath time, turning the backyard into a sudsy slip and slide. Or the day they discovered Champ had a talent for digging, unearthing half of Sam's vegetable garden before they could stop him. Each mishap was met with sighs and stern words, but always followed by laughter and affectionate head pats. For Noah, the dogs became a source of comfort and purpose. On days when he missed his parents acutely, he would sit in the puppy pen, surrounded by wagging tails and wet noses, finding solace in their uncomplicated love. He took his role as their caretaker seriously, meticulously recording their growth and milestones in a notebook, and researching everything he could about dog care. Sam, too, found unexpected joy in their new family members. He would never admit it out loud, but his favorite part of the day became the early mornings when he would let Daisy out into the backyard. In those quiet moments, as the sun rose and Daisy explored the dew-covered grass, Sam felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. As the puppies approached their 8th week, Sam and Noah began the bittersweet task of finding homes for them. They were selective, wanting to ensure each puppy went to a family that would love them as much as they did. Buddy went to a family with 3 young children, his gentle playfulness a perfect match for the energetic household. Whisper found a home with an elderly couple, her quiet nature a comfort in their peaceful home. Rascal, fittingly, was adopted by the local fire chief, his mischievous energy a hit with the firefighters. Sunny went to live with Noah's teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, who had recently gone through a divorce and fell in love with the puppy's sunny disposition. Champ found his calling as a companion to a young boy with autism, his patience and energy a perfect match. And Hope, the smallest but most determined of the litter, was adopted by Dr. Anderson, the vet who had been caring for Daisy and the puppies since their rescue. The day the last puppy left was emotional for both Noah and Sam. They had grown attached to each of the puppies, and seeing them go was harder than they had anticipated. But the sadness was tempered by the knowledge that each puppy was going to a loving home, and by the promises of regular updates and visits. That evening, as Noah and Sam sat on the porch with Daisy between them, there was a sense of a chapter closing, but also of a new one beginning. Daisy, now healthy and happy, looked up at them with eyes full of trust and love. She was no longer the frightened, emaciated dog they had found in the landfill, but a vital, joyful member of their family. "You know, Gramps," Noah said, scratching Daisy behind the ears, "I think finding Daisy was the best thing that ever happened to us." Sam nodded, a lump in his throat as he thought of how much their lives had changed in just a few short months. "I think you might be right, kiddo," he agreed. "Sometimes the best families are the ones we make for ourselves." As the sun set on another day in Millbrook, Daisy settled herself more comfortably between Noah and Sam, her tail thumping contentedly against the porch. The unlikely trio, a boy, his grandfather, and a rescued dog, had found in each other the healing and love they each needed. And though challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, bound by the unbreakable ties of their newfound family. As summer turned to fall in Millbrook, the story of Daisy's rescue and recovery began to spread through the tight-knit community. It started small, with neighbors stopping by Sam and Noah's house more frequently, often bearing gifts of dog toys or homemade treats for Daisy. Mrs. Johnson, the florist, would save the trimmed ends of her flower stems, knowing that Daisy loved to chew on them. Mr. Patel from the corner store began keeping a special box of dog biscuits behind the counter, just for when Noah and Daisy came by on their afternoon walks. Word continued to spread, and soon the local newspaper, the Millbrook Gazette, caught wind of the story. Sarah Chen, a young reporter eager to make her mark, reached out to Sam and Noah for an interview. At first, Sam was hesitant, not wanting to draw too much attention to themselves. But Noah, with his inherent understanding of Daisy's impact, convinced his grandfather that sharing their story might help other animals in need. The resulting article, titled A Tale of Second Chances, How One Dog United a Community, was featured on the front page of the Sunday edition. Sarah's writing captured not just the facts of Daisy's rescue, but the heart of the story, the transformative power of compassion and the unexpected ways that helping others can heal our own wounds. The response to the article was immediate and overwhelming. The Thompsons' phone began ringing off the hook with calls from neighbors and strangers alike, all wanting to know how they could help. The local pet store, Run and Fetch, reached out to offer a lifetime supply of food for Daisy. The town's veterinary clinic, where Dr. Anderson worked, offered to cover all of Daisy's medical expenses. But it was the impact on the community's awareness of animal welfare that was perhaps most significant. The town shelter, which had long struggled with overcrowding and underfunding, suddenly found itself inundated with volunteers and donations. People who had never considered adoption were now visiting the shelter, inspired by Daisy's story to open their homes to animals in need. Mayor Linda Hawkins, recognizing the momentum, decided to capitalize on the community's newfound passion. She organized a town hall meeting to discuss how Millbrook could become a more pet-friendly community. The gymnasium of Millbrook High School was packed on the night of the meeting, with every seat filled and people lining the walls. Noah, usually shy about public speaking, found himself at the center of attention. With Daisy by his side and Sam's encouraging nod from the front row, he stood up to address the crowd. "I didn't do anything special," Noah began, his voice trembling slightly. "I just couldn't leave Daisy and her puppies there in the landfill. But what happened after, how everyone came together to help, that's the real story. Daisy taught me that sometimes the ones who need help the most are the ones who can't ask for it. And Millbrook taught me that when we work together, we can make a real difference." His words resonated with the audience, and the meeting became a brainstorming session of ideas. By the end of the night, plans were in motion for a dog park, a low-cost spay and neuter program, and even a pet food bank for families struggling to feed their animals. The excitement wasn't limited to the adults. Noah's classmates, inspired by his actions, started a club at school dedicated to animal welfare. They organized bake sales and car washes, raising money for the shelter and spreading awareness about responsible pet ownership. Noah, once a quiet presence in the school hallways, found himself surrounded by friends who shared his passion. Even Millbrook's business community got involved. The local diner, Joe's Place, introduced a Daisy special to its menu, a veggie burger with a side of sweet potato fries, with $1 from each order going to the animal shelter. The hardware store began stocking more pet-friendly gardening supplies, and the bookshop added an entire section dedicated to books about animal care and rescue stories. As the community rallied, Sam watched with a mixture of pride and amazement. He'd lived in Millbrook his entire life, but he'd never seen the town come together quite like this. It reminded him of the barn raisings of his youth, when neighbors would gather to help each other in times of need. This modern version, centered around a rescued dog and his grandson's compassion, filled Sam with hope for the future. One crisp Saturday morning in October, the town gathered for the grand opening of the Millbrook Dog Park. Mayor Hawkins stood at the entrance, oversized scissors in hand, ready to cut the ribbon. Noah and Daisy were right beside her, with Sam watching proudly from the crowd. "This park," the mayor announced, "is more than just a place for our furry friends to play. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together as a community. It's a testament to the compassion of a young boy and his grandfather, and to the resilience of a dog who reminded us all of the power of second chances." As the ribbon was cut and dogs of all shapes and sizes rushed into the park, their excited barks filling the air, Noah felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything he'd experienced before. He watched as Daisy, now confident and playful, romped with her new friends, her golden coat shining in the autumn sun. The park became a gathering place for the community. On any given day, you could find a mix of people there, retirees chatting on benches while their small dogs played at their feet, young families laughing as their children and puppies tumbled in the grass, joggers pausing their runs to throw balls for eager retrievers. It was more than just a dog park, it had become a symbol of the town's spirit. The ripple effects of Daisy's story continued to spread. Other towns in the county began reaching out to Millbrook for advice on starting their own animal welfare programs. The Millbrook Animal Shelter, once struggling to keep its doors open, now had a waiting list of families wanting to adopt. And the annual Millbrook Fall Festival added a new event, a rescue dog parade, with Daisy serving as the Grand Marshal. For Noah, the experience was transformative. The shy boy who had arrived in Millbrook feeling lost and alone now walked with confidence, Daisy trotting happily by his side. He had found his voice and his passion, becoming an advocate for those who couldn't speak for themselves. His teachers noticed the change, commenting on his increased participation in class and his newfound leadership skills. Sam, too, had been changed by the experience. The The gruff exterior he'd worn like armor since losing his wife had softened. He found himself more involved in the community than he had been in years, offering his carpentry skills to help build agility equipment for the dog park and sharing stories of his farming days with the young volunteers at the animal shelter. One evening, as Sam and Noah sat on their porch swing, Daisy curled up at their feet, Sam turned to his grandson with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Noah," he said, his voice gruff with emotion, "I've been thinking about your dad a lot lately. About how proud he'd be of you." Noah looked up, surprised. They didn't often talk about his father, the topic too fraught with worry and missing. Sam continued, "He always said that true strength isn't about how tough you are, but about how you use whatever strength you have to help others. You've shown that kind of strength, kiddo. You and Daisy both." Noah leaned into his grandfather's side, feeling the familiar comfort of Sam's worn flannel shirt. "I miss him," Noah admitted quietly. "But I'm glad I'm here with you, Gramps. And I'm glad we found Daisy." Sam wrapped an arm around Noah's shoulders, giving him a squeeze. "Me too, kiddo. Me too." As they sat there, watching the sun set over Millbrook, they reflected on how much had changed in just a few short months. What had started as a simple act of kindness, a boy rescuing a dog, had blossomed into something much bigger. It had awakened a spirit of compassion and community that had been dormant in Millbrook, reminding everyone of the difference one person, or one dog, could make. Daisy, sensing the emotional moment, stood up and rested her head on Noah's knee. As Noah scratched behind her ears, he marveled at the journey they had all taken together. From a storm-tossed night in a landfill to this peaceful evening on the porch, they had traveled so far. And yet, Noah knew, their journey was far from over. The story of Daisy, Noah, and Sam had become more than just a tale of a dog's rescue. It had become a story of a community's awakening, a grandfather and grandson's healing, and the enduring power of compassion. As the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Noah made a silent promise to himself, to Daisy, and to the community that had embraced them. This was just the beginning. There were more animals to help, more challenges to face, and more opportunities to make a difference. And together, boy, dog, grandfather, and community, they would face whatever came next, bound by the unbreakable ties of love, compassion, and the knowledge that even the smallest act of kindness could change the world. While Millbrook was experiencing a renaissance of community spirit, 40 miles away in the city of Albany, Victor Matthews was fighting his own battles. The months since he had abandoned Daisy at the landfill had been a downward spiral of guilt, alcohol, and isolation. He had taken a leave of absence from his teaching job, unable to face his students or colleagues in his current state. His days blurred together, a haze of regret and self-loathing. It was on a particularly bleak morning, as Victor nursed yet another hangover, that he first saw the story. Flipping mindlessly through channels on his small TV, he caught a glimpse of a golden retriever on a local news segment. His heart stopped as he recognized Daisy, looking healthy and happy, playing in a dog park with a young boy. The reporter's voice cut through Victor's stunned silence. The heartwarming story of Daisy, the golden retriever rescued from a landfill, continues to inspire the town of Millbrook. Victor sat transfixed, unable to look away as the story unfolded. He learned of Noah's discovery, of the community's response, and of the positive changes Daisy had inspired. As the segment ended, Victor found himself overwhelmed by a tidal wave of emotions, shame, relief, and a glimmer of something he hadn't felt in a long time, hope. For the first time in months, Victor felt a spark of motivation. He showered, shaved, and dressed in clean clothes. Then, with shaking hands, he picked up his phone and made a call he'd been avoiding for far too long. "Hello, this is Victor Matthews. I think I'm ready to come back to my meetings." The voice on the other end was warm and encouraging, and soon Victor found himself sitting in a circle of plastic chairs at his local AA meeting. As he listened to others share their stories of struggle and recovery, Victor felt a sense of kinship he'd been missing. When it was his turn to speak, he surprised himself by sharing not just about his battle with alcohol, but about Daisy. "I did something terrible," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "I abandoned my dog when she needed me most. I was so lost in my own pain that I caused pain to an innocent creature who loved me unconditionally." The room was silent as Victor spoke, but the faces around him showed not judgment, but understanding and compassion. As he finished his story, his sponsor, Mike, approached him. "Victor," Mike said, placing a hand on his shoulder, "you can't change the past, but you can choose what you do next. What do you want to do?" Victor thought for a moment, then replied with a certainty he hadn't felt in years, "I want to make amends. I want to do something good, to try to balance out the bad I've done." With Mike's guidance, Victor began to rebuild his life, one day at a time. He returned to work, facing his colleagues' questions with honesty about his struggles. Many were supportive, and Victor found strength in their understanding. He threw himself into his teaching, using literature to explore themes of redemption and second chances with his students. But it was outside of school that Victor found his true calling. He began volunteering at the local animal shelter, starting with simple tasks like cleaning kennels and filling water bowls. At first, being around the dogs was painful, each wagging tail and hopeful glance a reminder of Daisy. But as the weeks passed, Victor found healing in the simple acts of care and kindness. The shelter staff noticed Victor's dedication and gentle way with the animals. Soon, he was asked to work with some of the more challenging cases, dogs who, like him, had known hardship and needed patience to learn to trust again. Victor found a particular affinity for these dogs, understanding their fear and hesitation in a way he never had before. One day, as Victor was working with a particularly skittish German Shepherd, the shelter manager approached him. "Victor," she said, "I've been watching you with the dogs. You have a real gift. Have you ever considered getting certified as a dog trainer, maybe specializing in rehabilitation?" The idea took root in Victor's mind. He began researching, taking online courses in his free time, and practicing techniques with the shelter dogs. For the first time since Sarafina's death, Victor felt a sense of purpose, a path forward that could perhaps begin to make up for his past mistakes. Months passed, and Victor's life continued to transform. He was now leading training classes at the shelter, helping families understand and bond with their new pets. His work with traumatized dogs gained attention, and soon he was being asked to consult with other shelters in the area. It was after one such consulting trip that Victor found himself driving through Millbrook. He hadn't planned it, but something pulled him towards the town he'd only seen on TV. As he drove down the main street, he saw signs for the dog park and felt a tug in his heart. Victor parked his car and walked slowly towards the park entrance. He stood at the gate, watching the dogs play, his eyes scanning for a familiar golden coat. And then he saw her, Daisy, running with joyful abandon, chasing a frisbee thrown by a laughing boy. For a moment, Victor couldn't breathe. Daisy looked so happy, so healthy. The transformation from the frightened, emaciated dog he'd abandoned was stark. As he watched, Daisy returned the frisbee to the boy, her tail wagging furiously as she received pets and praise. Victor was so lost in the scene that he didn't notice the older man approaching until he spoke. "Can I help you?" The man's voice was gruff but not unkind. Victor turned, startled, to find himself face to face with an older gentleman, Sam, though Victor didn't know it yet. I'm sorry," Victor stammered. "I was just watching the dogs. That golden retriever, she reminds me of a dog I used to have." Sam's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "You're him, aren't you? Daisy's former owner." Victor felt the blood drain from his face. He hadn't prepared for this moment, hadn't thought through what he would say if he ever came face to face with the people who had saved Daisy. But looking into Sam's eyes, Victor knew he couldn't lie. "Yes," he said quietly. "I am. And I know that nothing I can say can make up for what I did." Sam was quiet for a long moment, studying Victor's face. Then, to Victor's surprise, Sam's expression softened slightly. "Why don't you come sit down?" Sam said, gesturing to a nearby bench. "I think we have a lot to talk about." Over the next hour, Victor poured out his story to Sam, the grief of losing Sarafina, his descent into alcoholism, the moment of desperation that led him to abandon Daisy, and his long journey towards recovery and redemption. Sam listened silently, his face unreadable. When Victor finished, Sam spoke. "What you did was wrong," he said bluntly. "You caused a lot of pain to Daisy, and to yourself. But," he continued, his voice softening slightly, "I can see you're trying to make amends. That counts for something. Just then, Noah and Daisy approached the bench, the boy laughing as Daisy pranced beside him with the frisbee in her mouth. They both stopped short when they saw Victor. "Noah," Sam said gently, "this is Mr. Matthews. He used to be Daisy's owner." Noah's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in suspicion. But before he could speak, Daisy made a decision of her own. She dropped the frisbee and approached Victor slowly, her tail giving a tentative wag. Victor held out his hand, allowing Daisy to sniff it. For a moment, everyone held their breath. Then, with a soft whine, Daisy pressed her head into Victor's hand. Tears sprang to Victor's eyes as he gently stroked Daisy's fur. "I'm so sorry, girl," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." Noah watched this interaction, his young face a mix of emotions. Finally, he spoke. "You hurt her," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "She was scared and alone because of you." Victor nodded, not trying to defend himself. "You're right," he said. "I did hurt her. And I will regret that for the rest of my life. But you," he continued, looking at Noah with genuine admiration, "you saved her. You gave her the love and care that I should have. Thank you for that." Noah's expression softened slightly at Victor's words. Sam, watching this interaction, made a decision. "Mr. Matthews," he said, "why don't you join us for dinner tonight? I think we all have more to talk about." That evening, over a simple meal of spaghetti and meatballs, Victor shared more of his story with Sam and Noah. He told them about his work at the shelter, his newfound passion for rehabilitating traumatized dogs. Noah, initially skeptical, found himself drawn in by Victor's obvious love for animals and his commitment to making amends. As the evening drew to a close, Victor knelt down to say goodbye to Daisy. As he scratched behind her ears, he felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. "Thank you," he said, looking up at Noah and Sam, "for giving her the home she deserves, and for allowing me to see that she's happy and loved. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but knowing she's okay, it means everything." Noah, who had been quiet for much of the evening, suddenly spoke up. "Mr. Matthews, do you think you could come talk to my school's animal welfare club sometime? About your work with rescue dogs?" Victor looked at the boy in surprise, then at Sam, who gave a small nod of approval. "I'd be honored," Victor replied, his voice thick with emotion. As Victor drove home that night, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew that his journey of redemption was far from over, but for the first time, he felt truly hopeful about the future. He had been given a second chance, not just by Daisy, but by Noah and Sam as well. And he was determined to make the most of it, to continue working to make the world a better place for animals in need, one day at a time. As the crisp autumn air gave way to the first hints of winter in Millbrook, the town buzzed with activity. The annual Thanksgiving parade was just around the corner, and this year, it promised to be bigger than ever. At the center of the excitement was the newly formed Millbrook Animal Welfare Float, a joint project between Noah's school club and the local animal shelter. Noah, now in his final year of middle school, stood proudly next to the half-finished float in Mr. Johnson's barn. Daisy sat obediently at his feet, her tail thumping against the hay-strewn floor. Around them, a group of Noah's classmates worked diligently, painting, hammering, and arranging decorations. "Hey, Noah," called Lizzie, Noah's best friend and co-president of the Animal Welfare Club. "Where do you want these paw print cutouts?" As Noah moved to help Lizzie, he caught sight of his grandfather entering the barn. Sam's face broke into a wide grin as he took in the scene before him. "Well, would you look at that," Sam chuckled, reaching down to scratch Daisy behind the ears. "Looks like you kids have been busy." Noah beamed at his grandfather. "We're almost done, Gramps. Wait till you see it in the parade. Daisy's going to be the star." Indeed, Daisy had become something of a local celebrity in Millbrook. Her story had inspired not just the community's increased focus on animal welfare, but had also brought about changes in Noah and Sam's lives that neither could have anticipated. For Noah, the shy boy who had once felt lost and alone in a new town had blossomed into a confident young leader. His work with the Animal Welfare Club had given him a sense of purpose, and his bond with Daisy had helped heal the pain of separation from his parents. Though he still missed them terribly, especially during the holidays, Noah had found strength in the family he had built with Sam and Daisy. Sam, too, had been transformed by the events of the past year. The gruff, solitary man had rediscovered his place in the community. He now spent his days helping out at the animal shelter, using his carpentry skills to build and repair kennels, and even fostering the occasional dog in need of extra care. His house, once quiet and somewhat gloomy, was now filled with the sounds of laughter, barking, and the constant comings and goings of Noah's friends and fellow animal lovers. As Sam watched Noah direct his classmates, a familiar voice called out from the barn entrance. "Looks like I'm just in time for the heavy lifting." Victor Matthews strode into the barn, a smile on his face and a box of supplies in his arms. The kids greeted him enthusiastically, and even Sam nodded in welcome. Victor's integration into their lives had been a gradual process, filled with difficult conversations and tentative steps towards forgiveness. His first presentation to Noah's Animal Welfare Club had been a turning point. Victor's honest account of his mistakes and his passion for rehabilitating traumatized dogs had struck a chord with the students. Since then, he had become a regular guest speaker and mentor for the club. For Victor, this involvement had been a crucial part of his ongoing journey of redemption. Each time he visited Millbrook, each time he saw Daisy happy and thriving with Noah and Sam, he felt a mix of regret for his past actions and gratitude for the second chance he'd been given. As Victor set down the box of supplies, Daisy trotted over to greet him. She nuzzled his hand, tail wagging, and Victor felt the familiar rush of emotion that came with these interactions. "Hey there, sweet girl," he murmured, kneeling down to Daisy's level. "You keeping these kids in line?" Noah watched this interaction with a mix of emotions. It had taken time for him to come to terms with Victor's presence in their lives. But seeing the genuine remorse in Victor's eyes, and witnessing his dedication to helping other animals in need, had slowly softened Noah's heart. "Mr. Matthews," Noah called out, "could you help us with the banner? We can't get it to hang straight." Victor looked up, surprise and pleasure evident on his face. "Of course, Noah. I'd be happy to help." As the afternoon wore on, the float took shape. It was a colorful celebration of the bond between humans and animals, featuring cutouts of dogs, cats, and other pets, along with slogans promoting adoption and responsible pet ownership. At the center was a large photo of Daisy, taken the day she'd been rescued, alongside a current picture showing her healthy and happy with Noah and Sam. As the group stood back to admire their handiwork, Mayor Linda Hawkins poked her head into the barn. "Well, now," she said, her eyes twinkling, "if this isn't the finest float I've ever seen, I'll eat my hat." The kids cheered at the mayor's approval, and even Sam couldn't suppress a proud smile. Mayor Hawkins turned to Noah and Sam. "I wanted to let you know, the town council just approved the funding for the new wing at the animal shelter. We're going to call it the Daisy Wing, in honor of the dog who started it all." The news was met with excited exclamations from the group. Noah knelt down next to Daisy, hugging her tight. "Did you hear that, girl? You're going to help even more animals now." As the excitement died down and the group began to disperse, Sam pulled Victor aside. "Listen," Sam said, his voice gruff but not unkind, "Noah and I were thinking. Well, we're hosting Thanksgiving dinner this year for some folks from the shelter who don't have family in town. We thought maybe you'd like to join us." Victor was momentarily speechless, touched by the invitation. I'd be honored," he finally managed to say. "Thank you, Sam." Sam nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Just don't expect any fancy cooking. It's all about the company, not the food." As Victor drove home that evening, he reflected on how much had changed in the past year. He thought of the man he had been, lost in grief and alcohol, capable of abandoning a loyal companion like Daisy, and marveled at the journey that had brought him to this point. He wasn't that man anymore, and while he knew he could never fully make up for his past actions, he was committed to spending the rest of his life trying. The day of the Thanksgiving parade dawned bright and clear, with just enough chill in the air to make hot chocolate a necessity. The streets of Millbrook were lined with excited spectators, children sitting on their parents' shoulders for a better view. As the Millbrook Animal Welfare Float made its way down Main Street, the crowd erupted in cheers. Noah and his classmates waved from atop the float, and Daisy, wearing a festive bandana, sat regally at the front, as if she knew this parade was in her honor. Sam and Victor stood side by side on the sidewalk, watching the float pass by. Both men felt a surge of pride seeing Noah up there, confident and happy. "He's come a long way," Victor observed quietly. Sam nodded. "We all have." Later that day, as promised, Sam and Noah's house was filled with people for Thanksgiving dinner. Volunteers from the shelter, members of the Animal Welfare Club and their families, and even Mayor Hawkins had all squeezed in around hastily assembled tables in the living room and kitchen. As Sam stood to carve the turkey, with some difficulty, cooking for a crowd was not his strong suit, he looked around at the gathering. Noah was animatedly describing the parade to his parents over a video call, his face alight with excitement. Victor was deep in conversation with one of the shelter volunteers about a new training technique for anxious dogs. Daisy moved from person to person, accepting pets and sneaking the occasional table scrap. Sam felt a lump form in his throat as he thought about how full his life had become. A year ago, he had been a lonely widower, unsure of how to connect with his grieving grandson. Now, his house was bursting at the seams with love, laughter, and a sense of purpose. As everyone settled in to eat, Noah stood up, tapping his glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. "I just wanted to say," he began, his voice only shaking a little, "thank you all for being here. This past year has taught me so much about second chances, about the power of kindness, and about what it really means to be a family." He looked down at Daisy, who gazed back at him adoringly. "And it all started with a scared, hungry dog in a landfill. So I think we should all raise our glasses, or water bowls," he added with a grin, nodding at Daisy, "to new beginnings." "To new beginnings," the group echoed, glasses clinking around the room. As the meal progressed, filled with laughter, stories, and the warmth of good company, Sam found himself thinking about the twists and turns of life. He thought about how a series of seemingly unrelated events, a rescue, a community's response, a man's journey to redemption, had woven together to create this moment. Looking at Noah, happily chatting with his friends, and at Daisy, contentedly gnawing on a turkey bone under the table, Sam felt a profound sense of gratitude. They had all been through so much, had all been lost in their own ways. But together, they had found something precious, a sense of belonging, of purpose, of family. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Sam, Noah, and Victor found themselves on the front porch, Daisy at their feet. The first snowflakes of the season were beginning to fall, dusting the world in a soft, white blanket. "You know," Noah said thoughtfully, "I used to think happy endings only happened in books or movies. But now I'm not so sure. Maybe they happen in real life too, just in a different way." Sam put his arm around his grandson's shoulders. "I think you might be right, kiddo. But I don't think this is an ending at all. Feels more like a beginning to me." Victor nodded in agreement. "A new chapter," he added softly. As they stood there, watching the snow fall, each lost in their own thoughts, Daisy let out a contented sigh and leaned against Noah's legs. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the falling snow and the warmth of newfound family, they all felt it, the promise of new beginnings, the healing power of forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds of love that can form between the most unlikely of friends. The story of Daisy, Noah, Sam, and Victor was far from over. There would be more challenges to face, more animals to save, more lessons to learn. But whatever the future held, they would face it together. A boy, his dog, a grandfather, and a man seeking redemption, bound by the extraordinary journey that had brought them all together.